Hey everyone, it's Angie Atkinson, and today at queenbeing.com we're going to discuss how and why you need to raise your standards for future relationships if you ever want to be happy after narcissistic abuse. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Okay, so like I said, I'm Angie Atkinson. I am a certified life coach, an author, and a survivor. You can learn more about narcissism and narcissistic abuse recovery at queenbeing.com. If you visit narcissismsupportcoach.com, you will find a free 5-day email course that I created specifically for survivors of narcissistic abuse to help them get over the fear that holds them back. And also booksangieWrote.com, you will be able to find my books on this topic and related topics. All right, let's just jump right in. All right, so a discussion in my SPAN group, which is support for people affected by narcissistic abuse in relationships. Check it out at queenbeing.com/span, SPAN. Anyway, it's an online support group that recently led me to learn something or to get a question from one of my lovely survivors. She asked me what I meant when I told another group member that she could avoid getting involved with a narcissist in the future by simply raising her standards when she was ready to start dating new people. And the member who asked the question told me that she was recently divorced from a toxic narcissist, so a few months earlier, and she wasn't quite ready to think about dating yet, but she wanted to know what I meant when I asked that question. She said, or when I made that statement, she said, when I'm ready to date again, it would really help me to know what exactly you mean by raise your standards. What does that entail? So here's the thing, anyone who's not already in a relationship may be in search of that perfect someone, right? Someone they would imagine building a life with, whether they're male or female. And when you are waiting for Mr. or Mrs. Right, you might just think the opposite sex is too picky, or maybe you're too picky. But if you've been in a toxic relationship with a narcissist, you're a little bit broken, right? And it's not your fault. It's normal. Who wouldn't be broken after that stuff? You know what I'm saying? It's psychological and emotional and abuse, and sometimes even more than that. But that kind of abuse will leave you damaged, and it will leave you unsure of even who you are, let alone what you want in a relationship, right? So, before I get into the deal breakers, let me just make a statement here for you. And that is, when you are just out of a toxic relationship, you're going to be very raw. You're going to be very, what I like to, it's kind of like pliable, right? So it would be very easy for you to fall right into another toxic relationship. And this is what I think so many of my group members and survivors and people who, have been my coaching clients, people who are in who have been in these types of relationships, people who are recovering from these types of relationships or preparing to exit these types of relationships. These people, they have a lot of things in common, and generally they're very intelligent people. Generally they're attractive people. Generally they are very, empathic, where they just sort of feel people, and that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because a narcissist uh, always wants the best of everything. So if you ever doubt your value, and you've been involved with a narcissist, you have to recognize that a narcissist must see value in you in order to actually, you know, in order to want you at all. So even if he or she has stomped you into the ground and you've become a different person, just recognize that there is something in you that is beautiful. There is something in you that is worth having, or he would or she would have never wanted you. Feel me? All right. Let me back on the topic here. So anyway, I personally have certain deal breakers for any relationship, and this includes my current marriage. Okay, and let me just, mine are very simple, and maybe I should add a few more, and I guess I have a few more unspoken ones, but these are my very basics. Basically, these things, if anyone I'm in a relationship with does these things, that is my time that I will walk away. I will not discuss it. I will say, you know what you did, and I'll walk, and that's it. And I know that sounds cold and sharp, but there are certain things that I just know as a person I do not tolerate. Okay, and this is what you have to know for yourself, that there are certain things that you personally do not tolerate. Okay, listen up. Here we go. So number one, in my life, I will not tolerate being hit or intentionally hurt by anyone especially not my husband, okay, but anyone at all. Okay, number two, this one's mostly for my husband. Don't cheat on me, because quite honestly, I will not tolerate being cheated on, and if he cheats, then I'm out. And the same applies as it is. So, number three, don't hurt my children. This one obviously came along after the kids were born, so it was not in my initial deal breakers, but for the past 18 years, it has been one of my deal breakers, and I think every parent should employ that one in their own deal breaker box. Okay? I don't think I need to continue talking about it. I hope that you are physically safe and that your children are physically safe. If you feel that you are not, I would like it if you would turn the video off now and get some help. Get out right away and then come back to me and I'll help you get through the end of it. But you need to be safe physically before you can ever begin to fix your head. Okay? Oh, and if you don't know what to do or where to start, go to queenbeing.com and click on our emergency domestic violence resources page. There are tons of resources there that will help you to find what you need to get safe. All right, moving on. So, if you're still with me, and I hope that you are, it might, let me ask you a question. Or would you be surprised if I told you that deal breakers, when it comes to deal breakers with dating, men and women are shockingly alike in what turns them off, and that includes what, excuse me, what won't lead to more dates, right? So, knowing this can help you to avoid a dry spell. And if you're willing to raise your own standards, it can also help you avoid getting stuck to a narcissist again. Here's the thing. I don't think that you need to worry at this point about a dry spell, but if you are in a position where you feel like you want to move forward, well, this information can help you with that as well. Help you know what to do, what not to do, and what to watch for. That's what I'm going to talk about today. Might get a little lengthy, and I apologize if that's the case, but please stick with me. I've got some really good information for you, okay? So, what are some issues? What sorts of issues are red flags for potential future mates? Let's go ahead and start there, and then we're going to work our way into everything else. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is what you need to watch for, right? So let's start with number one. You got to make sure the person knows how to communicate, okay? So even on a first date, you're going to be able to tell if a person is capable of effective communication or not. Does the conversation flow naturally? Does it feel good to you? Does it feel comfortable? Or is it awkward and weird? Now, this does not necessarily exclude a person from being a narcissist because we all know that narcissists are generally very good communicators, at least from for people they don't know. Once they get beyond the point where they are where you're quite, they need to look deeper or they need to understand deeper, then generally they are terrible communicators, but they're great first impressionists. So a lot of these things in this beginning part here are just general tips, and then I'm going to get more specific at the end of the video to narcissists and very serious red flags. All right. But in general, not knowing how to communicate on a date is something that a lot of women just don't want to put up with. Okay. So if you are a dude, if you're a man, understand that. If you're looking to get involved with a woman, you want to be able to speak clearly and you want to know the difference between basic stuff like commonly misused words, because I don't know, maybe, some women might not have an issue with it, but women in general are tend to be into men that are at least relatively intelligent, but also just don't over stress about that. That's silly. All right, men might think that's too picky, but women, um, you know, feel like in general a man that doesn't know how to communicate from the start, whether it's with their eyes or their mouth, figure it won't get any better as the relationship progresses. And so you have to, for if you're in either case, you want to make a good first impression on someone, that's what you can do. Okay. So women in general do put more of an emphasis on communication than men because obviously this is how women relate. So for a lot of women, a deal breaker with communication is going to be someone who is, obviously the star in their own world. And of course, we all know this is also a pretty big red flag of a narcissist. So, what do I mean, right? Well, these are the types of people who may talk so much it's hard to get a word in edgewise, and it's normal for people to do that a little bit when they're excited about things. Sometimes, depending on their personalities, but when you're on a date, especially an early first, second, third date, it's real important that you see that the person isn't only talking about themselves. And when they ask you questions, are they asking you questions about you? about your life, or are they asking you how you feel about them and their life? If you remember back to when you got with your narcissist in the first place, you probably remember that, while he may have asked or she may have asked a lot of questions about you on the first date, in hindsight, you might be able to see that those questions were often leading questions that, in which you gave up information about that person that they later used against you, or about yourself that they later used against you, right? Even if they just simply said things like, "Well, I thought you were a visionary," or "I thought you were this," or "I thought you were that," you know. Even that is throwing something in your face sometimes, and sometimes in the worst possible way. Like maybe if you're in a situation where you're married to a narcissist and the narcissist starts cheating on you, and then you stop having sex with the narcissist, which of course the narcissist cannot tolerate because sex is yet another, you know, um, outlet for their supply need, I guess. So when that happens, then if you stop having sex with the narcissist because you don't want to get a disease or whatever, if you stick around even, the narcissist would be offended by that, of course, and wouldn't understand, and would, you know, would make your life very miserable. So, anyway, we're off topic again. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so something that you need to think about on that in those early dates is, yes, everybody wants to find out about their date, but for the narcissist is going to either use the information against you. Oh, I know what I was saying with the other story. Let me just get back there. So when you get to that point where you are not sleeping with the narcissist is angry about it with you, right? Then the narcissist, instead of understanding that you simply don't want to get a disease, or that this person, he's broken your rule by sleeping with this other person, or she's broken your rule, they may say, you told me you were really into sex when we met. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's how it comes down to. What it all comes down to is that, you know, the narcissist will somehow figure out a way to blame you for the fact that they cheated on you, and then they will come back around and, you know, be the injured party, and then somehow you'll be begging them to do what you would don't tolerate. And so, one of the things that you can do as you move forward, what happened to you in the past is not your fault. Okay, you didn't know, you weren't educated about narcissists, and because of that, it wasn't your fault. Nobody knows what this is until they deal with it. Nobody understands the extremely soul crushing abuse that you experience, sometimes without even a hand being laid on you, right? So that's something that you need to realize, is that it's almost impossible to imagine unless you're in the middle of it. But now that you've experienced it, and now you're educating yourself, now you are preparing yourself to become something better, to become something different, and that is exactly what you need to be focused on right now. Okay, so and we're going to get to that, but we're going to get to why you need to start to value yourself enough to set your standards, right? So anyway, during a date, you don't want to focus just on the bad stuff in your life. Okay, so someone you just met or just starting to get to know is not really going to want to hear all about how you hate your job, or the terrible day you had, or quite honestly, they're truly not going to enjoy hearing about your narcissistic ex. That's like seventh date material. But the thing is that if you do talk about your narcissistic ex, you wait until it's appropriate. You definitely do not want to do it in the first 3 or 4 dates, for a number of reasons. And just remember this, focusing too long on any negativity from your past isn't healthy anyway. So, unless you're going to end up married to this person that you're dating, you don't really need to tell them your whole story about narcissistic abuse. If you want to tell them at some point, if it feels right, if it's appropriate to do so, then do it. But, there's nothing saying that every single person you deal with needs to know that you were victimized by a narcissist. You can just say things like, well, you know what, it didn't work out, everything, whatever, or, it just wasn't right, or whatever. You don't have to give them details. You can just say, I don't like to think about the past. I like to focus on the future. Because, when you get to the place where, you think this person might be a forever person, then of course you're going to talk about your former relationships. And you may talk about them sooner than that, and that's okay. But think, if you're thinking that you really like a person, you just might want to focus on the positive as much as you can, because anytime you're focusing on negative things, you know what happens. Negative things are drawn it back to you in your life. Your energy, the vibe that you're putting out there, is truly what you're attracting. Whatever you're putting out, you're attracting back to yourself. Remember that. Stay focused on what you love and what's good in your life, even if it's just the simple fact that you woke up this morning and you stood up and you put some clothes on, or you didn't stand up and put clothes on, but you woke up and you breathed and you ate breakfast or you ate lunch. Think about those things. You had a roof over your head, you had a door that to your bedroom, you had a lock on your front door, whatever. There's a place you can walk in your neighborhood. You have a cat, you have a dog, you have some kids. Whatever it is, think about all the good things in your life. Okay, even if they're the tiny things, you start small and you can just find so many more things. It's so important for everything, but especially at this point while you're in your narcissistic abuse recovery period, where you're going through this whole self, sort of overhaul, because after having been in a relationship with a narcissist, you're going to be in so much pain, you're going to be so numb, and you're at the same time, which sounds almost impossible, but you know what I'm talking about if you're there. And you're also going to be like sort of a shell of who you're supposed to be. Okay. But the really awesome part of this is like a huge opportunity for you right now, because you get to decide how to fill it up. You get to decide who you want to be. And this is amazing. And if you think about that opportunity that you have in your life right this moment, it's huge. You could do anything you want to do. So what do you want to do, honey? What do you want to do? All right, moving on. Anyway, communicating with a date, it means communicating with the person that you're on the date with, right? It does not mean that this is the place for you to spill out your resentment and your heartache about someone that was in your life before. Just remember that. If you do bring your ex in a conversation, it's potentially an instant deal breaker for the other person, because that shows that you haven't worked through feelings about that person. And honestly, nobody wants a preview of the excess baggage that you might bring along. But on a more serious note, the fact is that you know you could scare away someone who's really worth it. Because the fact is that people who are so focused on the past and so focused on negative aspects of it, sometimes they turn out to be narcissists. But we're going to get to that. All right, just remember not to focus on your ex, especially when you're with your new person or potential person. Anyway, and that, like I was saying, it shows that you're inconsiderate. It's a deal breaker to use someone you barely know as a sounding board about lost loves in your own life. You feel me? Maybe you feel like it's a connection with the other person, but that person might think they should be charging you a therapy fee. I'm not trying to be funny, but it is kind of funny if you think about it. Anyway, what you need to do is you need to just work through your issues before you move on to dating someone new, right? So see a therapist or get a coach and make sure that all of your issues with that situation are resolved before you date someone else. And I promise you, you're going to do yourself a big favor. Listen, when I was going through my divorce back in the day, I was in a situation where I needed to leave my ex-husband, and so we were apart for almost a year before we were legally divorced. And so what I did was, look, I had been married for a couple of years at that point, and when I got to the place where I was officially, or I was technically single but officially married, I thought, sure, I could date if I wanted to, and I was sure he was dating, but it didn't matter because I didn't. I decided to stay faithful until I was legally divorced, and it wasn't faithful to him, it was faithful to me. Because what I did is I forced myself to, even though I was asked on several dates, several times by different people, I I just said, I'm sorry, I'm not ready yet. I need to wait until I'm legally divorced. And they would say, well, why, you don't want to cheat? And I'd say, well, I have to figure out who I am again. People, give me a minute, and like I said, it took almost a year. It was the best thing I could have done for myself at that time. I really grew as a person and I really began to understand myself again during that time. So, and anytime you separate from a narcissist, whether it's your mother or it's your husband or your wife or your father or your brother or whatever, anytime you remove a narcissist from your life or remove yourself from their lives, you know, you're going to have like a lot of overhaul to do as a person. Truly, you're going to find yourself in a position where you are simply just like I said, you'll be a shell of yourself. But like I said, it's a huge opportunity. Don't look at it as a bad thing. Look at it as an exciting opportunity. And now you get to decide. And how long has it been since you got to decide truly what you wanted? All right? Keep going. All right. Another issue that you want to watch for with people you're dating is people who are impolite. So what do I mean? Well, Everybody knows how to be polite, or at least most people do, okay? But if you don't know how to be polite, that could be a deal breaker. So I'm not saying that you have to know which fork to use, okay? But if you or your date hasn't mastered basic table etiquette, then take a couple lessons. I mean, go on, look at any YouTube channel that has etiquette, and you can learn the basic stuff. But truly, it's mostly be polite, be respectful, don't be outrageous, wipe your mouth off, and put your napkin in your lap. That basic stuff. Politeness is something that most Americans anyway are, and I think most English speaking people are taught from very early in childhood. So anyway, but here's some basic tips for you. So watch for, don't put your elbows on the table, don't slouch down so far in your chair, blah, 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 just basically use common sense. I don't think I need to tell you this. We all know nobody wants to look at chewed up food in someone's mouth. Women will consider this a deal breaker. Men, so be aware. And quite honestly, listen, men, during the period of time that I was single, as an adult, after I was married the first time, before I was married the second time, it was about 4 years before I met my second husband. But during that time, I cannot tell you how many people I actually walked away from because of dumb stuff like this. And maybe that was the wrong thing to do. But when some of these very basic, you know, slurping of the food or picking of the teeth or any gross things people do at tables, that's definitely a thing that a lot of women just aren't going to be into. But anyway, so if you do get a bite of something that tastes terrible, don't make a show of spitting it out, discreetly remove it with a napkin, da 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 da, right? Just basic stuff. I don't think I need to go through this all with you all, but all right. So here's another thing. This is a basic dating tip for anybody, but it's also going to be something you want to consider watching for. Okay, we all know we're all slaves to our phones these days. All right, but if you do need to take a text or a call during a date, and you better make sure it's an emergency, because if it's truly not an emergency, some people will just walk right away from you. And quite honestly, if it's a first date, and it's depending on what's happening. I mean, it's one thing to quick answer a text. Oh, sorry, this is my mom. Let me just tell her this and I'll be done. It's another thing to get on the phone, walk outside the restaurant or something, and leave you sitting at the table for 45 minutes while they talk. You know what I'm saying? You have to want someone who is considerate of you and your time and your space. And of course, you want to be considerate of their time and space and self as well, right? So we all know it's rude to pay attention to someone who isn't there with a cell phone, through a cell phone. So this does, of course, include the waitress or the waiter and, of course, your date, right? A lot of people call this a deal breaker. So if you're out with your friends, same deal. Don't be rude. Don't break stuff. The deals, that is. Anyway, when you do that, your date's going to wonder, is that how you treat other people? And, and you'll do the same thing, right? So being impolite is not having a tolerance toward people who have different, it's not about racism or culturalism or religious differences or anything like that. It's just simply, you know, being polite is being respectful to everyone around you, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? So, being small minded or making any sort of racist comments, to a date or from a date, please, don't tolerate that from your dates, because I mean, unless you are also a bigoted person or a racist, you do not want that in your life, even if they're not talking about the race that you are. Okay? Because it's hate, and it's disgusting, and it's toxic, and toxic is the opposite of what we are going for here. You feel me? All right. So just because you have, like certain music doesn't mean he or she will. You don't necessarily expect someone to give in to all of your tastes, and of course, you don't need to like everything they like. What you need to do when you're looking for the right person is to find someone who is interested in and willing to discuss even your differences. Someone who takes differences as, refreshing or creative, or someone with an open mind who isn't going to just, like the narcissist, completely disregard you as a person. Because when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, you might feel, like you don't even know how to talk about yourself anymore because you've spent so long not doing that. And so sometimes, that's why you need that time between relationships in order to heal yourself, because you need to learn how to talk about yourself again. You need to learn who you are and what you're all about. I mean, there was a time in my life when somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I couldn't even tell them. I couldn't tell them exactly what I did because I hadn't just said it out loud in a very long time. Do you understand? It sounds ridiculous, but that's what it was. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. If you're too sarcastic or you're making fun of a date early in the situation, or if the date is doing that to you, it is mean and bullying. And to make fun of anybody, well, it doesn't just make you look that way, it is that way. And just because someone's into something you're not, it doesn't mean that they're a bad or horrible person. If someone goes and dances naked under the moon every Saturday night, maybe you think that's a terrible thing, but maybe you need to find out why they would do that, and maybe you'll be interested in knowing, and maybe it won't bother you as much if you understand. You know what I'm saying? And that's obviously a very extreme example, but whatever the weird thing is, if they're otherwise a decent person and it's not something that you find ethically or morally upsetting or offensive, then it might be something that you want to look past initially to get to know the person a little bit. Okay? All right. I'm going to go through a couple more of these things about, initial dates, and then we're going to get into some more specific stuff. Okay. So, not taking care of your appearance is a deal breaker for a lot of people. Obviously, men and women aren't looking for someone who are flawless. I don't think it's surprising at all. But both sexes do look that they do look for someone who takes pride in their appearance up to a point. Most people, obviously. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is not being stinky. And for women, you want to dress your body in a way that is most flattering for you. You want to, and some people can go totally makeup free and rock it, and some people want to do a full face, and there's a lot of people in between there, both extremes. And I think regardless of what you decide to do with your look, just do it the way you want to do it. Make sure it's clean, and stink free. Don't overdo the perfume, etc., etc. But yeah, look your best because you're going to feel your best. If you ask me, I mean, yeah, of course you want to look nice for your date, but really look in the mirror, and if you feel like, damn, I look good, then you're on the right path. Okay. So anyway, please don't wear sweatpants on a date or in public ever. I'm not trying to be small when I tell you that, but I promise you. And if you're wearing sweatpants in public, unless they're like super cute, like little track pants that show off your butt, right, or whatever, don't do it because even if you look like you didn't put any effort into your look, make sure that you feel good about the way you look. Because, looking quote unquote effortlessly adorable, I like that too. That's fun. But that does not take no effort. That takes effort. At least once you're over, like 30. But anyway, even sometimes below 30. All right, I'm moving on. So save the house clothes for around the house, right? I just said that. Don't wear crap that in public that you shouldn't. Wear things that fit your occasion. Don't wear high heels on the beach. I mean, this is basic stuff, people. Anyway, yeah. So basically, I think what it comes down to on a date is dress appropriately. I'm not going to go through all these steps and explain them all to you because that's not really what this video is about. But a deal breaker in both men and women, I think, is stinky. I just talked about it. Personal hygiene. Use your deodorant. Brush your teeth. Make sure you're not stinky because nobody likes stinky people. And if they do, maybe that's cool, but I don't know any of them who like that. All right, so be clean. All right. Smile, make sure your teeth are brushed, etc. But really, with smiling, it's more about being friendly to a person. Okay, so let me just go back in case you wanted to read that slide. So, the first impression you're going to make on someone is a smile, obviously, or the first look when you see a person. So, a lot of men and women, another thing, if you're dating people online, a lot of people do not, whether they're male or female, they expect you to show up looking and acting like you did online. So, don't like put a picture from 20 years ago up there, and don't put a picture of like you and some strippers, or you and someone who looks similar to you but isn't you, or someone else entirely, and then show up and expect a person to be nice to you because nobody's going to be nice to someone who lies to them. I mean, even if they're polite and nice to you, they're not going to be. You won't get a second date. All right. So, my husband actually told me a story when he was younger. He was talking to a girl online very early, like when it was a BBC board, which was I can't even remember what it stands for, but it's like the very early internet, like during the internet relay chat days in the 90s. He met a girl online and she told him all these lies. She said she was, blonde hair, 36, 24, 36, whatever she said, blue eyes, all this stuff. And he shows up and she is from India and she is Indian. And he wouldn't have had a problem with her being Indian, but he didn't understand why she wanted to lie about her appearance. So obviously they did not have a second date. And, I guess that worked out okay for me. But anyway, moving on. All right. So, yeah, be who you are and all that. And another example of this is a girl who pretends to be into things that guys like. Ooh, I hate that when just to impress a guy. Now, see, this is something that they can bite you in the ass later, ladies. Listen up. And the same for guys who lie about the beer belly. But let's get back to that whole thing about someone pretending to be into things that they like just to impress someone. This could also go with men. Okay, so but anyway, the bottom line is, if you meet someone and they're like, "Oh my God, I love hockey so much. It's the best thing in the whole wide world," and then you're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I like hockey too. That's awesome. Yay!" But really, secretly, you have no interest in hockey and you hate it. Well, you have two choices right now. You can just be straight up with that person and be like, "I don't love hockey, but you're awesome. Can we hang out and I wouldn't mind go to a game with you now and then, something like that." But if you go, but if you say something like, "Look, hockey." If you personally don't like hockey, then you need to just say it. Look, I don't like hockey, because if you lie, then what if you end up marrying this person? Then you're gonna have to spend your whole life pretending to like hockey, or you're gonna have to admit that you lied. So just be who you are from the front. And when we're talking about the online thing, don't say you have what guys or girls, just be, don't say you're super fit if you have a beer belly, or don't say that you're a size 2 if you're a size 22. I mean, just be honest, because there are people who do appreciate a beer belly and a size 22, and there are people who don't want anything but washboard abs or a size 2. And honestly, I don't know about y'all, but a long time ago I learned this one. You If you try to put yourself in a position to be with someone who doesn't like, who likes something that significant about you, or who doesn't have a problem with it, who's initially going to have a problem with something major about you, you're just setting yourself up for heartbreak and failure. And you're setting yourself up to be, if that person, decides to be with you, despite the way you look, you know, maybe that's not somebody that you necessarily want to be with. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't matter to you, but I personally, in a romantic relationship, I personally prefer to be with someone who finds me physically attractive, because that is healthier for me as well as for them, if you think about it. So I wouldn't want to try to be, for example, as a woman who's 5 foot tall and a little curvy. I would not want to try to be with someone who is into 6'3", 100-pound models. You know what I'm saying? That would be stupid. I would be horrific to them, and I would not want to be with somebody who isn't into me. Feel me? Okay. I think that's something that you should consider. I mean, maybe that's not important to you, but I personally would not want to be in that situation, and I hope that you wouldn't either. Okay? All right. So don't lie about your body type, looks, hobbies, blah, blah, blah. Basic stuff. Okay? Like I just told you. It'll backfire on you. If you're a smoker, admit it. If you're a drinker, admit it, because again, you're going to be yourself eventually. Okay. Let's talk about, when it comes to unresolved personal issues, the world's going to have some emotional wounds. Everybody's going to have some. Life sucks sometimes, but going on and getting through these issues by working through them, is the way to go. Seek a counselor, seek some coaching, blog about it, do what you need to do. Okay. Once, just because you went through some bad stuff in the past doesn't mean you need to be ashamed. It's normal, but dragging around the bad stuff, especially on dates, but at any time really, that's an issue. That's a problem. Personal issues that are deal breakers involve things like not being able to let go and move on from anything that hurt you emotionally or otherwise, and springing that upset on your date. So nobody wants that. I mean, imagine how uncomfortable it would be if you were meeting a new person and you were on a first date and then they just started crying in the middle of the date and they had this big dramatic reaction. Nobody wants that. And if you like that sort of thing, well, that's fine. But I don't like it. So that's just me, maybe. Anyway, your date doesn't want to hear about the times your former friend stole money from you or skipped out on you without paying rent, unless it's a story that's kind of funny or it's a story that relates to something they're talking about, and you keep it quick and not, overly gory, I guess. Something to consider. But again, obviously you're going to want to go with the moment, and every situation is different. So, but these are just some basic overviews. So, if there's daddy or mommy issues, nobody needs to talk about that on a first date. Same with brothers, sisters, neighbors, things that are eating away at you. You need to deal with them before or after your date, not during. Okay. Again, and we've already talked about that. Date doesn't want to hear a big list of problems. Okay. So if you have a personal issue that's driven you to try to deal with it through the development of an addiction, like say you found that you were tired all the time, so you started doing meth or whatever it is, and obviously that's going to be a deal breaker. And if you are in a situation where you are dating someone who you find out, has a drug addiction or is an alcoholic or whatever, if you don't walk away from that, at least on a romantic level, I mean, if you really want to try to help that person, that's fine and you should do that, but you should not do that as their girlfriend or boyfriend. You should do that as a friend and move on with your life because that person who is an active addiction, I'm not saying someone who's been a recovering alcoholic for 5 years, fine, fine. Recovering drug addict, fine. That happens. People have problems, and people sometimes are able to move past those. And sometimes people who are recovering addicts are the most insightful people you'll meet because they've been through they've been to hell and back, right? But when they're not in recovery, you need to walk away, or you need to help them get in recovery and then walk away because the fact of the matter is that they will hurt you, and it's not their fault. It's not, but they will. And you just need to know it and don't try to be saving people, okay? You can't save everybody. You have to save yourself first, okay? So, yeah, having an addiction, it's not fair to expect anyone to deal with, not you, not them. Anybody who's in and this should really say it puts too much on you emotionally because I'm talking to you. I'm saying to you that if you're with someone who's dealing, with a drug addiction or whatever, you are the one you need to walk away. Don't get into a relationship with someone. And on the same token, if you are personally struggling with alcohol or drug addiction, it's not a good time for you to get in a relationship either. You need to get safe and clean so you don't die. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but addiction is horrible and it's a disease. And if you don't take care of yourself, you don't really belong in a relationship right now anyway. And the same goes for any potential mates. So if you're in a position where you are not a drug addict, but you meet a drug addict, walk away. Walk away, walk away. Okay? Okay. So, you know, obviously addiction masks who you are. People with these problems have mood swings. There's just not a good way to begin a relationship, okay? So you don't want someone you want someone who's dependable. So for both men and women, dating people who don't know how to keep their word is a deal breaker. So don't let yourself be lied to. Don't let someone who says one thing and means another be in your life. Be someone, find someone who is straight with you and tells you how it is politely and without hurting your feelings. Okay. At least in the first few dates. Okay. People like narcissists are often prone to mind games, as we all know, gaslighting, all that good stuff. So something to consider. We all want someone who has solid character. We all want someone who is dependable and who, as the relationship develops, we can count on, in varying ways. A person who isn't dependable is always going to have a lot of excuses, why they didn't show up when they said they would, why they blew you off, etc. And so if this is happening early in your dating relationship, it's a red flag. Okay? People who aren't financially stable are a lot of times looking for someone they can lean on, and that's also a big red flag and someone you don't want to be involved with. Being someone who can't take care of himself or herself should be a deal breaker. Don't allow that to happen to you again. Men and women both want independent, partners these days. And when you're ready to move forward and be in a dating relationship, you should be standing on your own 2 feet and ready to move forward that way. And I don't mean just financially, but and I don't mean you have to be rich, okay? I'm saying you need to be able to, if God forbid your date promises to pay and doesn't pay, you need to be able to pull out your wallet and pay for the stuff. And then don't date that person again unless there's a really good reason for it, okay? Men and women, who have lives that are out of control aren't people who you can build a relationship with, that you can't trust them. So you want someone who has their life in control, at least on up to a point. obviously everybody has moments of chaos in their lives, but maybe a moment of chaos isn't a time you wanted to get into a serious relationship. You feel me? Without trust, there can't be a healthy relationship. Someone who is too clingy isn't someone you want to, depend on. So don't let somebody be, you know, I've said this one before, but like if your first date ends with lunch on the third day, you've been staying together for 2 days or whatever, that's too much. It's not normal. And even though you might feel like it's amazing, it might be amazing at first. A lot of times those kinds of relationships end up with one of the partners being a narcissist because that's part of the love bombing thing, right? And that's what, a lot of people see love bombing as kind of being clingy at the beginning because, but what's behind it is that a lot of times these narcissists, they need that, they need that supply. They don't want to be alone. So, but, in every case, a dating relationship should be a two-way street, right? It should be, give and take. Everyone, needs their own circle of friends, whether that's individual or together, but it's important that they have outside interests during the dating relationship. And it really should include different friends, at least at first. I mean, once you're married, it sort of happens the where you a lot of times end up with my friends becoming our friends. But it is what it is. So when you have separate interests, and it does help a dating relationship to stay fresh and seem more interesting. So you don't want to allow yourself or the other person to lose their identity and their friendships because you spend more time together. And that's it. And that especially I want to say is for you. You don't want to allow yourself to lose your identity because you want to spend time with this person. This is one of the things that happens to us when we're in relationships with narcissists, where we are put in a place to lose our own identities, and that's why so often we feel like a shell of ourselves when we finally get away from them, if we do. This is another one, and this is one I'm going to talk about later in this as well. But being too familiar too fast, huge red flag of a narcissist actually, early in a relationship. So there are certain physical boundaries that shouldn't be crossed unless it's clear that person is open to that kind of contact. So on a first date, you need to have and also to expect personal boundaries. So you don't treat someone like an old friend you can hang all over until you get to know them and know that that's okay. You don't want to make someone uncomfortable. Men and women can make the other person uncomfortable by being too clingy, too physically touchy, and you can see if you watch a person, if you put your arm around them and they stiffen, you take your arm away, you can feel it. Or if you put your arm around you put your arm around them and they put their head on your shoulder or whatever, then you're in a more positive way. But just keep it respectful and follow the physical and verbal cues of the other person. So, part of the problem is that because dating has really become such a checklist, a lot of people are trying to see, does this person fit the bill physically? Obviously, they also want to know, is are they compatible? Are they a good fit? And I think that's important because, yes, of course, you need to date someone you're physically attracted to up to a point. Because otherwise, like I said, and someone who's physically attracted to you, right? Then you can't just put your hands all over someone on a first date. Like you can't go to the supermarket and squeeze the melons, right? So, but generally, because men are usually taller and bigger, have more physical strength, a lot of women will feel very uncomfortable if you are too handsy at the beginning of a relationship, especially on a first or second date. And a lot of times, they may become intimidated or uncomfortable, and this can actually lead to unintentional sexual harassment or intentional, or even in some cases rape, and that's terrible. But technical rape where she consents, but at under duress, and that's no good. So ladies, you need to stand up for yourself, and you need to let the men know what is okay and what is not okay. And men, y'all need to do the same thing because some women are too aggressive as well. And this very often includes female narcissists. Okay. Never assume it's okay to touch someone, and don't let anyone assume it's okay to touch you unless you're fine with that. So there should be a clear okay on both sides. It's not just a physical thing. It's being too familiar too fast as well. It can also be an emotional thing, right? So if a person is pushing for emotional depth that hasn't developed, that turns people off, and that should turn you off. An example of this is like if a couple just started dating and by the end of the first week, one of them is like, hey, let's move in together, babe, or is already talking about being in love. Just ding, 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 red flag, red flag. That's a narcissist right there, or a potential narcissist. Again, that's the love bombing stuff, and it's very easy to fall into it. But it's not easy to date these days, right? But these are some ideas for some deal breakers. You got to figure your deal breakers out and find someone that fits in that, right? So, and now I'm going to start talking with you about standards. If your life is less than you want it to be, it is possible that your standards are too low. I just noticed this video is at 45 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up and I'll just do the next one in another video, okay? So I will see you in a little while for the next video in which we're going to talk about standards. My name is Angie Atkinson. This is queenbeing.com's daily show, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day.